La Asamblea escuchará un discurso.
The General Assembly will now hear a statement by His Excellency Carlos Alvarado Quesada, President of the Republic of Costa Rica. I would like to ask protocol to please escort His Excellency to the rostrum.
En nombre de...
On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor of welcoming to the United Nations His Excellency Carlos Alvarado Quesada, President of the Republic of Costa Rica. As a Costa Rican myself, I feel very honored to introduce a young leader who is working tirelessly for a more peaceful country and a more peaceful world, a world based on solidarity, a more inclusive world, a more just world, a greener world, and a bluer world. Mr. President, I would like to invite you to address the General Assembly. Mr. President, we will only be strong and prosperous as long as the world's most vulnerable people are as well. This is not some romantic vision of multilateralism. It is a reality that we see over and over again in the face of the common challenges we face. We are only as safe as the most vulnerable people are. This is the central idea of human security. But we find it hard to understand this truth, and in particular to carry out actions to protect all of us. Leaving no one behind. This is a moral guide, a guide for action. It does not only exist with regard to the most vulnerable people, but with regard to the interests of everyone, because we are a single, interconnected, and interdependent macro system. The evidence is at hand. Millions of people around the world, mainly the poorest people, are awaiting the vaccine against COVID-19. Only 2 out of 10 people in poor or lower middle income countries have received a first dose of the vaccine, while in high or upper middle income countries that number is 8 out of 10. This inequality is abysmal and tragic. The solidarity which resulted in COVAX has not had the necessary impact, and access to vaccines is completely unequal. Costa Rica advocates for COVID-19 vaccines to be available to all the world population as a global public good. The COVAX promise must be fulfilled, and the developed countries can make that happen. This shortage and the ticking of time are the source of, or the breeding ground for more pain, death, and potentially the emergence of new virus variants. Today, it is necessary that through effective multilateralism, we manage to make COVAX a concrete solution. In that sense, I would request the support of the G20 to make this a reality. As long as we don't reach maximum global vaccination, all of us, even those who have accumulated vaccines, will be vulnerable to potential virus mutations or the economic ravages of the pandemic. Now, at the same time, over the past few months and past few weeks, we have seen how extreme natural disasters have hit the entire world, from Germany to Nigeria, from Australia to Haiti, from Kiribati to Central America, from the Philippines to the United States. We're seeing floods, hurricanes, melting of ice caps, forest fires, poverty, loss of crops, migrations. We have examined the recent report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC. In the worst-case scenario, if no immediate action is taken and if emissions continue to grow at the current rate, by the end of this century, the planet's temperature will increase by 4.4 degrees Celsius, and consequently, the strength and frequency of extreme events will also increase. Ironically, the countries that have that generate the lowest carbon emissions, such as island states or my own region, Central America, these are the countries that are the most affected by climate emergencies. The extreme weather effects lead to migrations and cause developing countries to take on more debt to cope with adaptation and reconstruction. The pandemic, the climate crisis, unemployment, and the limited investment opportunities are putting a substantial strain on the developing countries' social and political stability. And due to the global interconnectedness, they're putting a significant strain on the stability of the entire planet. And while this is happening, global military spending continued to rise in 2020. How will we be able to explain to the next generation that while there was a raging pandemic in which vaccines were not available to everyone, and in the face of an unprecedented climate crisis, the world was investing more in weapons? How is this absurd situation possible? The future generations are calling to us less military weapons, more investment in peace. Dear friends of the global community, this generation and the next one face a unique challenge in the history of humankind, which is to preserve life on the planet and its cultures in the face of the threat of destruction. Now the question is whether we're doing enough and whether we're doing everything necessary to achieve that. And if that is not the case, what must change? The reality of an interconnected planet must make us understand that today, the interest of the most disadvantaged is the interest of everyone. It means to realize that the best way to be selfish is to be supportive and generous, that accumulating money, knowledge, or health deprives the entire world of better conditions for humankind as a whole. However, to go beyond that and to fight for our future and the future of our youth and children, human will must establish a course of action, not mere words or calls to action, but concrete commitments with responsibilities and quantifiable changes, quantifiable in their impact, and qualitative ones in their ethics and morality. Ladies and gentlemen, the pandemic is also an opportunity to build a better world and promote an economic and social recovery that generates sustainable, green, inclusive, and resilient societies that are adapted to technological and digital transformations. Costa Rica, together with the World Health Organization and dozens of countries, proposed the CTAP, which is a repository of technologies and intellectual property. The aim is to democratize innovation and technology, particularly in the area of health, treatments, and medicines. The goal is to make them accessible to all people in all countries, especially those who are in vulnerable situations or live in poverty. Here is where we must act with assertively. I call on you to strongly support and join this initiative. It is no secret that the pandemic has put a lot of pressure on developing economies. Economic decline, unemployment, the fall in tax collection, and the increasing expenses on vaccines, treatments, and economic support programs have hit emerging economies hardest. Creating a 650 billion fund of special drawing rights is a step in the right direction, but it's not enough. More than 40% of this amount is allocated to countries that are already rich, and only 1% of those resources have been mobilized for the people of developing countries. The governments need support in their public finances and their treasuries beyond simply strengthening the reserves of central banks. In this context, Costa Rica and as pro tempore president of the Economic and Commission of Latin America and the Caribbean, has proposed the creation of a fund to alleviate the COVID-19 economy, FACE, F-A-C-E. This is an extraordinary support fund of nearly $500 billion funded by a 0.7% of the GDP of the largest and most robust economies in the world, those representing 80% of the world's GDP. This fund would be managed by multilateral development banks as concessional loans to developing countries. The funds would be long-term loans, 40 years, at fixed rates, low rates, to provide extraordinary funding to countries with economic limitations and allow them to respond to the crisis and to stay on track to meet the 2030 development agenda and the SDGs. For ambitious and initiatives such as CTAP and FACE to be successful, the developed countries must step up. I dream of an agreement between countries like the United States and China, a commitment to the world, not to focus on competing, but to cooperate in order to push the world forward. A world that largely depends on the determination of its leaders, in particular the leaders of the G20. And once again, I call on these leaders so that we can understand that interdependence between self-interest and solidarity are two sides of the same coin. We must have a positive ambition for the future of this planet. The 3 United Nations conventions on climate change, biodiversity, and desertification are simply one reality, the reality of a planet that must stop its warming, global warming, that must preserve its life and ecosystems, and that must protect and restore the lands where food is grown. We must be ambitious in the objectives to be achieved in 40 days from now at the next COP. It is an imperative for the survival of humankind. We cannot lower our guard and lower our climate ambitions in the run-up to COP26 in Glasgow or in the run-up to biodiversity COP15 in Kunming. Costa Rica has set an example and has demonstrated that nature can save us and that sustainability and human development are possible. Also, for this reason, starting in 2019, we launched our plan to decarbonize our economy by 2050. But today, only 15% of the Earth's resources are protected and 7% of the oceans are protected. Scientists agree that a greater area of the planet must be protected and restored in order to preserve it against the climate crisis and the accelerated loss of biodiversity. For this reason, the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, led by Costa Rica, France, and the United Kingdom as co-leader for the ocean, is a nature-based solution that aims by 2030 to protect 30% of the marine and terrestrial ecosystems of the planet. It also aims to avoid exceeding a global temperature increase of 1.5 Celsius and promote the protection of the ocean. More than 70 countries have joined this initiative, and I invite other states to do so as well. We also make a call to stop oil development and exploration, and for this very reason, together with Denmark, we are launching the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance, BOGA, for its acronym in English. Understanding and experiencing our interconnectedness and our interdependence on this planet is what can lead us to a new stage in development of humankind. It will enable access to opportunities for economic well-being for the most vulnerable populations, particularly indigenous peoples, Afro-descendant peoples, migrants, women, children and youth, internally displaced persons, and the LGBTI persons. It will put this new global contract into practice. We welcome the declaration of August 31st as the International Day of Afro-Descendants and the creation of the United Nations Permanent Forum of Afro-Descendants. in the framework of the bicentennial celebration of Costa Rica's independence, we have been reminded of our interdependence. It's an interdependence that must make us look back and support Haiti in these challenging times. Haiti was the very first country in the Americas to end slavery. That same perspective makes us raise our voices to stop unilateral measures that are contrary to international law and which affect the Cuban people. And at the same time, we must demand that the exercise of the fundamental rights of every Cuban citizen be respected. The right to assemble and express their opinion. Interdependence makes us advocate for peace and reiterate our desire for a world without nuclear weapons. Therefore, we call on countries to join the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which has already reached 55 ratifications among 86 signatories. Similarly, we advocate for a nuclear weapons-free Korean peninsula so that we can build peace together, stability and security. We reiterate, just as the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, did a few days ago, we reiterate our deep concern about the human rights situation in Nicaragua. We are concerned about the imprisonment of political opponents, journalists, and students. We call for democratic institutions, respect and promotion of human rights, freedom of expression, and the press to have all the necessary conditions to operate freely in this brethren country. We recognize the Malvina Islands as Argentine territory, and we make a respectful call to settle this dispute peacefully. Costa Rica cannot fail to honor our international commitments to the women and girls of Afghanistan. We cannot remain silent when the new regime does not allow girls to have an education. Educating girls today is the key to empowering the leaders of tomorrow. Friends, it is an honor to serve in this office because this forum has allowed me to represent the aspirations and values of the Costa Rican way of life. Peace, democracy, environmental sustainability, equality in diversity, and the defense of human rights. With hope, I say that this new global contract has a name, and it views as development as something that is circular, something that must be shared, something to invest in and to fund, not to accumulate. The new global contract makes welfare a circular good. That route was designed by humankind to achieve this new global contract, and it is called the 2030 Sustainable Agenda and its 17 SDGs. I would like to express the hope that history will remember this time, its people and its leaders, especially the most powerful and hence the most responsible ones, such as those who took this route and gave this planet a new opportunity. Thank you very much.
Al señor presidente.
I want to thank the President of the Republic of Costa Rica for the statement he has just made, and I would ask protocol to accompany His Excellency.